I woke up sluggish and heavy. Maybe it's the weather. This early morning darkness always gets to me. The window was fogged from the inside and I could barely make out the street from my bedroom. A quick shower, clothes on, and I went to the kitchen for breakfast. Buttered toast and a bit of cheese. Lately, I've developed a taste for the fancy kinds. Makes me feel almost like a gourmet. Finished with a coffee, brushed my teeth, and within half an hour, I was ready for work. I wanted to get to the school early today. There were a few papers I'd left behind that needed grading before winter break. I wanted to return to the biology test that hadn't gone so well, so the students could redo them after the holidays. I put on my shoes and buttoned my wool coat. I was ready to go. With one last glance around the apartment, something that I do out of habit, I finally opened the door. And that's when I got my first surprise. The doorway was sealed. A thick, transparent sheet of plastic covered the exit. The door opened inward, but the frame had been hermetically sealed. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe construction work in the building, maybe a mix-up. I reached out carefully to touch it. The plastic was cool and taut, lined with yellow and red quarantine tape along the edges, professionally attached to the frame. For a moment, I just stood there, confused. Someone or something had sealed me in. But why? I leaned against the plastic, trying to see into the hallway. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, I thought. But when I pressed harder, a black figure appeared beyond the doorframe. The moment he saw me, he shouted,
"Step away from the plastic!"
A sharp, angry male voice. Then came a distinct metallic sound, the unmistakable click of a weapon being readied. I stumbled back in a panic and ran to the living room. Hiding behind the couch, I crouched on the floor, trembling. I waited for shouting, for footsteps, for anything. But nothing came. The plastic barrier remained untouched. The man outside didn't enter, he simply stood there, motionless. After a while, I crawled out from behind the couch. I turned toward the windows. At first, I thought they were fogged too, but they weren't. They'd been sealed shut as well, covered completely in plastic. The light filtering through them was dull and yellowish, and my apartment glowed faintly in that sick, sterile hue, as if the whole place had become one giant quarantine chamber. Day 5. I've been a prisoner in my own apartment for 5 days now. That's plenty of time to inspect everything, to analyze, to observe, to attempt some kind of logical assessment of what's happening to me. The most plausible hypothesis is that I've become the subject of an experiment. Whether I volunteered for it or was taken without consent, I can't say. But every indicator points in that direction. Communication has completely ceased. My phone is inoperable. The screen flickers, the buttons don't respond. It behaves as if under constant electromagnetic interference, as though some kind of frequency jammer is active in the area. The television produces only static, no signal, no sound beyond the white noise. Water and electricity, however, still function. That detail is significant. It means someone is deliberately maintaining the utilities. They don't want me dead. They just want me here. The strangest part is the food. Every morning, fresh groceries appear in my refrigerator. I never hear the door open, never see movement, but the shelves are always stocked. I don't know how it gets there. Either there's a concealed access point to this apartment, or the delivery method is something entirely different. Perhaps an automated supply protocol within the parameters of a controlled study. The first few days I was nervous, waiting for something to happen, waiting for an explanation, but nothing did. I kept the front door open for a while, hoping to catch a glimpse of anything in the hallway. I saw only the guard, always the same black uniform, the same posture, motionless. They rotate every 6 hours. No words, no gestures. The exchange is perfectly synchronized, military in precision. Without any form of entertainment, I've turned to reading. Old, half-finished books left on the shelves for years. There's a strange peace in it. Inside these walls, my focus sharpens. My thoughts align. In a way, the confinement itself feels orderly, almost pleasant. Perhaps this is how the mind behaves when it begins to adapt to captivity. Day 8. I no longer know what time it is. After 8 days of confinement, the days have started to blur together. My biological rhythm, something I once took for granted, has lost its external cues. I can't tell when it's morning or night anymore. I do keep count. Every time darkness falls, I draw a line on the wall. I try to judge the passing of time by the yellow light filtering through the plastic sheets that cover the windows. But I can't see the street at all. No movement, no sound. The outside world has gone completely silent. The books no longer entertain me. The words are still there, neatly arranged, but their meaning feels hollow. My days have turned into a monotonous cycle. I hate sitting on the couch, waiting for something, anything, to happen. I've tried talking to the guard outside. I called out, asked questions, even begged him to answer me. But he didn't. Not a word, not a single gesture. So I sit for hours in the living room, watching the faint yellow light seep through the plastic and wash over the walls. The color is sickly pale, as if someone had filtered the life out of sunlight itself. Since yesterday, I've had a splitting headache. I don't know what's causing it. Maybe it's the lack of fresh air or a psychosomatic response to prolonged confinement. The pain fluctuates, a rhythmic pressure behind my temples, sometimes followed by dizziness. The water and electricity still work. Each morning the fridge is restocked, but even the food has lost its appeal. The flavors are muted, everything tastes the same. Day 10. For the past 2 days I felt terrible. The headache hasn't gone away. In fact, it grows worse by the hour. It feels as though something inside my skull is beginning to expand, as if my brain were under pressure, trying to burst free from the confines of the bone. If that weren't enough, new symptoms have appeared. Severe nausea, vomiting, complete loss of appetite. I can't keep food or fluids down. More than once, I've lost control of my bodily functions. I've tried to take a shower, but even simple movements exhaust me. I'm probably running a fever, my entire body trembles, my muscles spasm involuntarily. My skin feels cold to the touch, yet inside I burn with heat. When I looked in the mirror, my pupils were dilated, my eyes were bloodshot, and my face was pale. Based on these observations, I suspect an acute infection, or perhaps a toxic reaction. Possibly something in the food supply. Yesterday, I crawled out to the front door and begged the black-clad guard outside to help me. He didn't respond. Not a word. In desperation, I tried to provoke him. I even vomited on the floor near the door, hoping that would get a reaction. I assumed they wouldn't allow their experimental subject to die. But nothing happened. Only silence. That's where I lost consciousness. Right there, by the door. When I woke up, I was in my bed. The apartment was spotless, the air was fresh, the bedding changed, and the floor scrubbed clean. No trace of anything that had happened remained. Every surface was dust-free, disinfected completely. I have no idea how I got back into bed. But someone, or something, must have entered while I was unconscious. Curiously, I feel better now. The headache has dulled, the fever has subsided. It's strangely comforting, this state of recovery. My body seems to be regenerating, though I don't understand how or by what mechanism. Perhaps I'm being monitored and they intervene only when my system reaches a critical threshold. Day 14. It's been 4 days since I received any food. The refrigerator is completely empty, and each morning it remains that way. What's truly strange is that I don't feel hunger at all. No stomach growling, no dizziness, none of the usual symptoms of hypoglycemia. In fact, at times I feel unusually light, as if my body has shifted to some alternative energy source. Objectively, this contradicts every known physiological principle. The human body in such deprivation enters a catabolic state, first depleting hepatic glycogen stores, then consuming muscle tissue and fat reserves. The process is inevitably accompanied by fatigue, muscle pain, and cognitive dullness. But I experience none of that. Only visible physical change, while my mind remains clear. I've lost significant weight. The bones beneath my skin are sharply defined, the muscles nearly gone, yet I feel no pain. It's as if my nociceptors have shut down, or a central inhibitory mechanism in the nervous system has become permanent. It appears that the neurotransmission pathway for hunger, between the brainstem and the hypothalamus, has been disrupted or possibly reorganized into an entirely new feedback pattern. My metabolism no longer behaves like that of a human being. This morning I looked into the mirror again. My skin is pale, grayish in tone. The capillaries beneath my eyes have vanished. My face is hollow. I don't know whether this is due to hypoxia, hemoglobin degradation, or some unknown metabolic transformation. But I am certain now, the biological system I once understood no longer functions within me. My body has begun to obey different rules, and despite my fear, I need to understand what those rules are. Day 15. My body has changed. I don't know what triggered it, but the transformation is undeniable. Over the past few days, I've conducted several observations on myself. It's been more than 6 days since I last ate or drank anything. By all physiological standards, my body should have already collapsed. Renal failure, dehydration, and metabolic disruption forming a fatal triad. Yet I'm still here, fully conscious, sitting in the living room, staring at the covered windows. I can no longer tolerate light. Even the smallest ray of sunlight causes a sharp, burning pain in my eyes, as if my retinas had become hypersensitive to the visible spectrum. A physiological explanation might be melanin depletion or retinal degeneration, but it's equally possible that my nervous system has begun responding to photic stimuli in an entirely new way. The pain is unbearable, so I've covered every window with blankets. The apartment now exists in a state of perpetual dusk, but at least the burning has stopped. My second observation, this isn't my apartment. Every detail looks the same, a near-perfect copy, but the discrepancies are subtle and consistent. The walls have no cracks, though they've been there for years. The bedroom door, which used to stick and never quite close, now fits perfectly in the frame, as if newly installed. Even the floorboards sound different beneath my feet. The entire space feels reconstructed, as if someone replicated the environment of my life, but not quite accurately. I've left the front door wide open. I no longer care that the guards are standing outside. The fear I once felt is gone. I'm not sure if this is apathy, neurological desensitization, or simply the shutting down of the human instinct for self-preservation. My body is something else now. And the space around me, it feels like a controlled environment. A laboratory replica of reality, where I am being studied while I try to determine how much of me remains human. Day 17. My body continues to change. I don't know what precisely initiated the process, but the biological pattern is unmistakable. The earlier symptoms, light aversion, reduced body temperature, loss of hunger and thirst, have all been joined by new, striking signs. This morning, all my teeth fell out. There was no pain and no bleeding. They simply loosened and slipped soundlessly from their sockets, as if the periodontal ligament cells had received a signal for self-dissolution. When I ran my tongue across the gums, the surface felt smooth and cold. A few hours later, new teeth began to emerge. They are far sharper and longer than a human dentition should be. The incisors taper to points, the canines have grown disproportionately, and the molars are ridged, predatory, almost serrated. Anatomically, such regenerative speed would be impossible. The new tissue is likely not calcium phosphate based, like normal enamel, but composed of some harder, unknown biopolymer. Perhaps the result of an alternative mineralization process. My hair has also begun to shed en masse. Not in patches, but uniformly, as if the follicles had simultaneously received an apoptotic signal. My scalp is now smooth, pale, and cold to the touch, like the surface of a wax figure. The photosensitivity has become extreme. Even the faintest beam of sunlight pierces my vision with searing pain. My skin itches violently as though undergoing a photon-induced allergic reaction. My pupils remain fully dilated and my retina seem to have adapted entirely to darkness. I can distinguish even the smallest light sources with unnerving clarity. I've blacked out every window. Only a faint glow filters through the open doorway, and even that is intolerable. Darkness is no longer an enemy. In fact, it feels as though my eyes function best within it. I still attempt to interpret all this within scientific parameters, but the biology I once knew offers no explanation. Evolution does not leap this far, unless someone gives it a push. Day 19. I can't sleep. It's not that I'm having sleepless nights, the need for sleep itself is gone. My eyes don't tire, my body doesn't crave rest. My mind remains constantly active, yet I feel none of the exhaustion that prolonged wakefulness used to bring. Physiologically, this is impossible. In humans, sleep deprivation leads to neurological disintegration within days, hallucinations, confusion, and cardiac arrhythmia. I show none of these symptoms. It's as if the mechanisms of neural regeneration are functioning without rest, or as if my brain has deactivated the circuits responsible for dreams and fatigue entirely. Sometimes I look out through the covered windows to tell whether it's day or night. The faint yellow glow is my only reference point, but my sense of time is gone. Day and night have become indistinguishable, as though the world has forgotten how to turn. But today, something happened. I had just begun to pull back the blanket covering the window when I heard footsteps in the hallway, followed by the rustling of the plastic sheet. 2 armed soldiers in black uniforms stepped into the living room.
Get on the ground!
One shouted. When I didn't react quickly enough, the other one screamed.
Get on the fucking ground!
One of them shined a flashlight directly at me. The light was blinding. It felt as if my eyes were melting, a burning sting spreading across my skin. I dropped to the floor and lay motionless. One soldier stood over me while the other began searching the apartment. Then a third figure entered. He wore a yellow hazmat suit. His face was completely obscured by the mask. He set down a metal case beside me. Sterile medical instruments were inside. He opened it and removed both a vial and a syringe. "What did you do to me?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Why are you doing this?" I pressed.
Stay calm,
He said finally.
we're just taking blood.
"Why am I locked in here? What is this?" I tried to ask, my voice trembling.
We didn't do anything.
He replied coldly as the needle pierced my arm.
You did this to yourself.
His words hurt me more than the injection. What did he mean by that? I hadn't done anything. I taught biology. I graded papers. I lived my life. I watched as my blood filled the vial. It flowed thicker than it should have. Its color was unnaturally dark, almost black. The doctor gave the vial a slight shake, studying its viscosity, then nodded. Without another word, all 3 of them left. The door sealed again. The plastic rustled once more, and I was alone, in the silence and the dark. Day 22. The past few days have brought more changes. My body has undergone another series of transformations. Rapid, uncontrolled processes that no known biological model could describe. A few hours after the examination, unbearable pain overtook me. It felt as though my bones were shifting apart, as if my body were trying to rearrange itself from within. A sharp, stabbing pressure built beneath my ribs, and a tearing, pulling force traveled along my spine. The pain came in cycles, fading, then returning in another region. My back was the worst. I was certain my ribs were about to burst through my chest. My eyes began to ache as well. Pressure seemed to build up behind them, a pulse deep inside my skull. It felt as if only a thin membrane kept them from rupturing. When the pain finally flooded my entire head, I lost consciousness. When I awoke, everything was different. My vision had become unnaturally sharp. I could see the heartbeat of the guards beyond the door, rhythmic red pulsations as though the wall were transparent. I didn't just see them, I felt them. The rhythm of their breathing, the faint vibration of their motionless bodies. The apartment had changed too. Every piece of furniture was in its place, yet nothing felt familiar. The door was no longer the same. It had been replaced with thick metal, and there was no handle. It seemed impenetrable, as if it had been built specifically for me. And there was something else, an odor. This morning, a strange, sweet, almost hypnotic scent filled the air. It was the kind of smell that would make a human stomach turn, and yet I was drawn to it irresistibly. The source was the refrigerator. When I opened it, horror took a hold of me. It was full of decaying flesh, animal remains, bones, viscera. Maggots crawled among the meat, and the air vibrated with the sound of flies. And still, the smell was inviting. Then the hunger came. Not the ordinary humankind, but something primal and overwhelming. It was as if the starvation of the past days had condensed into a single violent impulse. I fell to my knees before the refrigerator and began to eat. I don't know how long it lasted. I remember only the taste, salt, iron, and the bittersweet tang of rot. The flesh stank, yet with every bite I felt something deep and instinctual. Something that could only be called satisfaction. I couldn't stop. I am completely undone. After last night's disgusting meal, I slipped into something like a trance. It felt chemical, like intoxication. My body relaxed, my mind cleared, and I fell into a deep, steady state that resembled sleep, though I doubt it was that. When I awoke, everything looked the same as before, yet somehow nothing was. The guards outside had changed again. I could sense the difference. Their sweat smelled different, and one of them had a faint heart murmur I could hear through the wall. I didn't need to see them, I simply knew they were there. But it wasn't that which broke me. It was the reflection. Out of boredom, I wandered the apartment and found myself in the bathroom. When I looked up at the mirror, the thing that looked back at me was no longer human. My body is anatomically unrecognizable. The skin is gray, devoid of circulation's warmth. The underlying tissue lacks the red tint of oxygenated blood. My eyes glow faintly red. Perhaps a new pigment layer has formed within the retina. My teeth jut forward, sharp and irregular, the canines grotesquely enlarged. Dark, dried blood crusted the corners of my mouth. My posture is hunched, the spine arched, the neck thrust forward, like a predator poised to strike. My arms seem longer than before. The nails have been replaced by black, keratinous claws. For a moment, I turned away from the mirror. Something human still stirred within me, some primitive echo of shame or routine. I stripped down and stepped into the shower. I don't know why. Perhaps instinct or the last reflex of what used to be my human self. The water was cold, but my skin didn't react. No goosebumps, no shivering. Only the steady sound of water running down a misshapen body. Of all my clothes, only the pants fit now. The shirt would no longer go over my shoulders, and the shoes no longer made sense. My feet have lengthened, the nails curved and claw-like. I looked back at my reflection, and this time I didn't feel disgust. I felt anger. Not human anger, but something raw, ancient, an instinct without a target, only direction. Deep within me, below thought and language, something old has awakened. It isn't emotion, it isn't reason. It's simple, undeniable fact. I exist, and something unimaginably ancient within me is hungry. Day X. I no longer know how many days I've been locked in here. The concept of time has lost all meaning. My biological clock, the system that once regulated my sleep-wake rhythm, has completely collapsed. I don't know if it's day or night. In fact, I'm not even sure where I am anymore. I've begun to suspect that the apartment I live in isn't really mine. It's too perfect to copy. Everything is where it should be, yet the details betray the illusion. This is only a reproduction. There are no cracks on the walls. The paint is fresh, and the scratches and stains are gone, as if reality itself were a laboratory model, rebuilt around me over and over again. What worries me most, however, is my consciousness. I'm not always awake. Sometimes everything blurs, as if I'm slipping into a dream. But these aren't dreams. When I return, the room is different, and my body feels as if it has fought something unseen. The last time I regained full awareness, the apartment was in ruins, but not in the way that someone might overturn furniture in a rage. The walls had collapsed, the plaster had fallen away, the bricks were cracked, and beneath them I saw a layer of thick, reinforced metal, as though the apartment were, in truth, a containment cell, an artificial shell built to hold me. There were claw marks on the metal, long, deep gouges that matched the shape of my hands perfectly. I don't need to speculate. I did it. But I don't remember doing it. I don't remember anything. My consciousness skips like a broken machine, and every time I come back there's a little less of me. My thoughts are disjointed. Sentences fragment. Sometimes when I write down a word I don't recognize it right away. It's as if I'm learning a new language. One my body already speaks, but my mind can no longer understand. I don't know how much time I have left before I fall apart completely. But I need to finish this. I need to write it all down before the other one takes over. Final page. I'm somewhere else now, a massive sealed metal chamber. I can't say I'm surprised. After what happened, this feels inevitable. At some point, the refrigerator filled again with dead, rotting meat. And I ate. My body demanded it. The smell intoxicated me. I couldn't resist. Then I heard the noise. The metal door opened and I sensed 7 distinct heartbeats, all beating in rhythm, all moving closer. The soldiers, with their black uniforms, helmets, and blinding lights. Their beams flooded the apartment. My eyes burned instantly, my skin sizzled under the rays. So I stayed hidden in the kitchen's darkness. I waited for them there, in the shadows. An 8th figure entered, the man in the yellow hazmat suit. He carried the same metal case as before.
Target located.
One of the soldiers said, holding a small beeping device.
In the kitchen.
The others nodded. Then their lights found me. They were blinding. The pain flared and my body trembled as if tearing itself apart. And then it happened. Something broke free inside me. The other one, the thing that shares this body, took control. The feeling wasn't human. It was instinct, cornered, furious, and primal. I heard myself growling, but I no longer knew if the sound came from me. My mind dimmed, but my movements were fast and precise. In a single motion, I reached the nearest soldier and snapped his neck. The beams burned. Bullets struck my flesh, but my body didn't respond. I felt the impacts, but not the pain. Only rage. One by one, the soldiers fell. The room reeked of blood and metal. The doctor stumbled backward and then turned and ran. I followed on all fours like an animal. That's when he entered. Someone new. massive and unfamiliar. He held a strange device that whirred as it powered up. Then came a flash. Just one. The next moment I was across the room. Some kind of weapon, no doubt. The hole in my chest was the size of a fist. My black, viscous blood spread down toward my torso. I watched it flow and felt, for the first time, a kind of peace. Maybe this was the end. Maybe I was finally free. But I didn't die. I woke up here. The wound is still there, but it's closing. The rate of cellular regeneration is exponentially higher than human baseline. The death process has stopped. Now I live in this sterile, metallic prison. They left me a bed and my journal, nothing else. I don't know why this happened. Why me? I was just a biology teacher, a man who believed in cell division, inheritance, and the laws of life. But the life I once knew no longer applies to me. I will live here forever, in the dark, and watch as everything we thought was human begins to change. There are many questions we face throughout our lives. Who, what, where, why, when, how? Should I? Would I? It doesn't stop, and the questions in a single day could fill my bank account to the max. We are curious beings with no right to our idiosyncrasies about certain secrets of the universe. We do not need to understand why the sky is blue, or the weight of a drop of water before it splashes on a hard surface. Sometimes questions go unasked. If they are not spoken, does that make them real? Another question we should not consider. The main thought should be survival, not eccentric notions about how the universe works. But here's a question. If we only think about survival and not the universe, what makes us different from primates? We could be like that forever, lost on the brink of vast knowledge, unable to understand or act on ideas that form only with more questions. It's like a carousel going around and around. When it stops, nobody knows. The cycle of infinity is hard to grasp, but objects, thoughts, or numbers continue beyond what we know as humanity. Our brains stop at some point, just as primates' brains cannot mature beyond a certain point in the human world. What would happen if, as a mass community, we were told not to think or ask questions because it could mean exile or death? Eons ago, we were conquered, and since then, questions have been outlawed by every region, state, and continent. We are obedient without the option of rebellion. They watch us closely. They look and act like us, but their mechanisms and movements are not ours. Their bodies twitch oddly, and if you stand too close, you can hear their bones crack under their skin. It was as if they constantly shifted to stay in the form they chose. I remember reading about them when they came. It was a normal day with no warning signs, but suddenly, these beings shot down from the sky, outnumbering us by millions. Our military, government, and social order were demolished within seconds of landing. These monsters impose strict routines and force us to eat only food served by cafeteria chefs, who were once hospital staff. The cafeteria is now one massive room stretching for miles, with counters where servers wait for you to come down an assembly line with your tray and bowl before you are ushered to one of thousands of benches to eat for exactly 20 minutes. Then you must finish and return to your duty. The food was great, with no complaints about flavor or appearance. It was somehow an improvement over human food and looked different too, all glossy like plastic. Our duties included odd tasks we found peculiar, like making the same outfits a million times in factories built overnight. Then there were the weight classes where every woman had to meet a standard. If they failed within a set time, they were taken away and never returned. Men had to reach a certain mass and look healthy with little body fat. Those who failed were also taken away and never heard from again. It didn't matter how you lost weight or changed your appearance. As long as you played your role perfectly and met all requirements without fuss, your numbers would rise. Weigh-ins were held every Sunday morning in malls. Each store served as a weigh-in room, and robotic doctors recorded and transmitted the data to a higher being. We were measured and checked before attention was given to our plastic breasts, sculptured thighs, hand-gripping hips, injected butts, and hollowed waists. The wealthy got the best, while the others relied on luck or botched surgeries from unregistered doctors in unsanitary basements. After reaching perfection, you were escorted away with praise and never heard from again. My number is 764,236, but my mother calls me Tessa. Giving everyone a number has stripped our identities and personalities. My height is a joke. I barely reach 5 feet and have been fully grown for 30 years. I fight to keep my weight at exactly 100 pounds, sometimes teetering between 110 and 115. I got lucky with my breasts. I didn't have to undergo surgeries or injections like the other girls. I admit I have so much Botox I barely know how to smile. My face is more plastic than flesh now. We all had to be a certain shade of color, or were given 2 chances to meet the hue before being tossed out like those who failed the weight requirements. My nails were perfectly manicured and glossed, cut to appear more appealing. My butt and thighs were my greatest assets, especially hard to maintain at my age. Pushing the end of my 30s and having to look 20 was a full-time job that left me exhausted and poor. Body enhancement surgeries cost more than organs, which some doctors treat as currency if in good condition. Our streets are continuously guarded by armed security, a mix of aliens and robotic technology they brought. They are strong. I've seen protesters and rebels shot down by the aliens' brute strength and inability to bleed or get injured, which enforces obedience. Some found refuge in sewers but were captured and executed. There is zero tolerance for mutiny, treason, and wrinkles. I haven't seen many elderly. I don't know where they go or if they just die somewhere. Gloom is everywhere. You don't want to be caught breaking rules, even at home, as they watch you constantly and ensure compliance. Some schools were cleared out and replaced by massive auditoriums where hundreds are taught what to say, how to speak, and how to enunciate. Etiquette is required at all times. The punishment for disobedience is a week in the pit, which no one talks about. Salons are booked daily and pull in crates of currency. Not cash or card, but points ranked on your forehead that change with classification. Once you reach 100, you are chosen and sent to a haven where freedom is a luxury that no one has had. Or so we are told. Gray hair is not allowed, and the wrong hue can drop your points drastically. Bad hairdressers who make mistakes lose all points and get a bald head. Department stores here sell only sizes small and below. I've heard some women remove ribs to get the perfect waist. If you weren't thin, you weren't in. Glasses were not an option. If your eyes weren't corrected within a set number of check-ins, you were punished by being made blind until fixed. I was hitting 98 in ranks and about to hit the jackpot. I walked the streets as comfortably as I could, trying not to be disturbed by anticipation and fear. I felt like I was in a live reality show where every scene mattered or the movie would be ruined. Suddenly, my head flashed, and 2 security men came to me immediately. People around cheered. I was headed to my prize. I was put in a limo and taken to the finest hotel I'd ever seen. They gave me a suite to myself and the finest gown and jewelry I've ever laid my eyes on. Security told me to get dressed and wait for someone to come get me. I sat on the silk covers of the feather duvet when someone knocked and entered. A beautiful woman, perfect with a glossy plastic face and sculptured body, came to escort me to my next duty. I couldn't breathe, I was so excited. I tried to make my extra blonde hair smooth and polished, make my skin glow after years of skincare, and do my best with contouring that fit my surgeries perfectly. Throughout, my number 100 flashed brightly on my forehead, and everyone I passed clapped for me. I was riding the euphoria when I looked through a cracked door and saw a line of girls like me lying peacefully. That would be me soon, and all I could do was daydream of my moments. Then, one girl woke up and panicked. I didn't understand until she began to scream.
I can't move my body. Someone help me. I can't move my body.
She was crying out, and I saw her get injected with something that made her still before someone came and quickly shut the door, silencing her pleas for help. I suddenly felt scared and confused, and questions I wasn't supposed to ask bloomed in my mind. What was about to happen? Where was I going? Why couldn't that woman move, and why was everyone so still? I began to breathe heavily and prayed that the sweat on my forehead wouldn't ruin my flawless makeup. I was escorted into a spa room like the one I had seen moments ago. A group joined me as we filled assigned tables. The plushness made me dizzy from the fumes wafting through the air, captivating me even more. I pressed my back against the table cushion and took hard, even breaths, fighting the urge to fall asleep. I needed to see what happened next. I needed to understand why that girl couldn't move and why I had these questions. Was my true reality awakening? Was something tragic waiting outside this human-trafficked factory? Someone spoke on the speaker, silencing the tranquil noises. They told us to relax and close our eyes, which was easy to do. The speaker went off and kind music returned, shifting from dripping water to static noises. I felt so good, and the endorphins almost pulled me in, but I stayed awake. I opened my eyes just enough for my lashes to touch them and saw a robot standing above me at the end of the table. I squirmed a bit and caught the alien's attention.
Is there a problem?
The woman was monotone and too chipper to sound right. To sound like a normal human, and with the way they spoke, you could tell if they were speaking to electronics or not. I'm just not comfortable lying like this. I need to readjust. I squirmed more, hoping to find a better position to escape this hell they planned for me. Are you better now? The alien and its vicious voice twitched its head at me, and its eyes went way too wide. I am better now, thank you. I closed my eyes again and placed my arms behind my head to better protect my neck from whatever stung that captive before she went limp. Most people around me were asleep when a woman entered. She was like us, with a number near 100. This must have been her job, injecting those who came for the winnings. Her butt looked like it was filled with concrete, and her chest was lopsided. Her face, after surgeries, made her look more inhuman than ever. She jabbed needles into necks while swiping on her phone, probably Tinder. I moved my cushioned pillow just in time for the needle to pass through the fabric and miss my neck. My positioning was perfect, and I was proud. Later, someone grabbed my feet and arms and carried me out onto a moving conveyor belt. I tried to stay still, whispering for my twitches to stop. I was getting away with it as I passed employees adjusting my outfit and hair. Bursts of white smoke brushed over a group of us before moving down the line. I watched those ahead enter a machine that placed them inside plastic boxes. I looked around desperately for something to help me escape the tomb I was about to enter. On each side of the conveyor belt were stacks of gears and metal rods. I subtly reached back, grabbed the first thing I could, and shoved it behind my back before entering my prison. The plastic box left the factory and entered a brightly lit room. It was thrown around as it moved from place to place. I was stuck at the bottom of a shopping cart. Judging by the scratched floor tiles, we were traveling through a grocery store. My box was carelessly placed on a shelf among other dolls that looked like me. I watched their plastic bodies pressed against the package backs in an aisle with millions of dolls. Then the world shook, and my box rumbled before I saw a pair of knees in front of me. They were childlike, but larger than anything I'd seen. The child backed up, and I gazed at her with wonder. I had to press against the package just to see the bottom of her neck. I watched her pick a package, and her mother said something I couldn't understand through the plastic before the girl put the doll into a massive shopping cart. I leaped off my box and pulled out an old pipe I had grabbed before entering this hell. I used the sharp end to cut through the thick material while the aisle was empty. Then I made a slit big enough and fell for what felt like an eternity onto the tiled floor. I landed on my back, and everything wasn't as it should be. How was everything so big? I looked up at a side aisle at least 70 feet above me. I got to my feet and stood before a doll trapped inside a box. I mourned him before seeing movement on his face. That's when I realized the dolls were paralyzed and mute, still trapped inside their fleshy prisons. His eyes moved rapidly, and I jumped out of sight just as another giant entered the aisle. I panicked, wondering how I'd get out of this. I was breathing heavily when a massive hand grabbed me from nowhere. A giant little girl dangled me from my foot when she noticed me jolt behind the boxes. I squirmed in her hand like a worm jiggles its body trying to get free. She showed her mother, and the two of them took me to a young man. The colossal attendee took me by the waist, and my body just flopped around as he lifted me and then dangled me by the arm. I squirmed, trying to free myself, crying uncontrollably, and he shook his head. "Must have a malfunction." The massive giant stuffed me into his pocket, my body cramping in all angles as I tried to keep breathing. "I will make sure to send it back to the factory for resetting," I heard the man call out to the giant girl and her mother. I felt the attendee begin to walk somewhere as I was tossed around with change and wads of gum wrappers that were all big enough to cover my body twofold. I was off somewhere with this alien, and when he said factory, that meant back to my reality. I had to keep believing that I wasn't plastic. In the cobalt blue light that precedes dawn, I drove like a shadow fleeing from the morning sun, speeding along the highway until it cleaved the desert landscape in two, and the claustrophobic city faded from my rearview mirror. After several neglected byways, I reached the alligator skin surface of a decaying asphalt road. I navigated its deepening cracks and numerous potholes carefully. It was as if my tires were the fingers of a medic, examining wounds from the road's long battle with the desert. This failing membrane to civilization gave way to a different world that morning. Pale yellow signs perforated with various common caliber bullets stood like multi-eyed sentinels, stoically denoting the upcoming surface change. Rusted T-posts, sinewed with rotting barbed wire, ran along both sides of a gravel washboard road. "This is it, County Road 6, one of the sentinels proclaimed. I jostled into that world, leaving a cloud of dust and rock in my wake. The sage and rabbit brush side-eyed, and the low-lying cactus jeered, cursing my presence. I was set to arrive sooner than I had hoped for. I could see from a distance that my late-grandparents' agent for that matter had not arrived. I slowed down considerably as I approached the only house to take root in this arid hellscape. Upon reflection, I'm not sure why. Perhaps the house, on a subconscious level, demanded I do so. Sagging wings of a wooden gate swung outward, as if they were anticipating an overdue embrace. The house which the fence bordered did not look nor offer such gestures of welcome. A sun-bleached reddish door looked like the swollen tongue of a dead animal, and the dilapidated porch a crude serving plate. The house's siding was warped and splintered like the shackles of an aggressive porcupine. The two upper windows harbored black abysses which the morning sun could not set aglow. Desert plant life had invaded the abandoned lawn, reclaiming its small patch of stolen land. Beyond the parched edifice of jumbled wood and cracked concrete was a glorious view of the far-off mountain range. It extended to the north and south beyond the limits of human sight, the western border of the strange world that I dared to enter. Brian Lawson parked his black Honda Accord in a rutted driveway. He emerged from the car, sore and tense from the long drive. After a meager attempt at stretching, he plopped a cigarette between his plump lips. As he drew in a couple of revitalizing puffs, he opted to gaze at the mountain range, instead of the intimidating and decrepit building. While leaning on the warm hood of his car, he thought to himself, "This is a view I could get lost in for an eternity and be perfectly content in doing so." After a few more deep drags, he snuffed his cigarette and took one last hopeful glance toward the road. Searching for any sign of an approaching vehicle, he reached into his pocket for an old smartphone while an unceremonious text message awaited. "Hey Brian, I'm running a little late for the showing. Feel free to check the place out. The door should be unlocked. Apologies for the tardiness." Brian returned the phone to his pocket without replying and made his way to the house's swollen tongue. The door was indeed unlocked and loudly creaked open, revealing a large kitchen. A small, four-paned window, which beheld the sweeping view of the distant mountains, stood above a dingy sink. One of the panes was broken, which allowed a cool draft into the house. The pane must have been broken for some time. Various debris had accumulated in the sink and on the surrounding countertop. A simple small table occupied the center of the kitchen. There was only one chair, of which was knocked over onto its side. Brian made his way through the two-storied Sears catalog home. Nothing of interest was left behind, just bare-bone furnishings and the discolored outlines of once-hung photos. Brian rubbed his lower jaw pensively as he moved throughout the lower floor, rattling off thoughts aloud. Strange, why or who, for that matter, took the photos down? Oh well, nothing a fresh coat of paint can't mend. I wonder how much it'd cost to get some modern wiring in this place. This wall would be a great spot to hang the TV. Let's take a gander upstairs, shall we? Brian grasped the stair railing, rough and in need of oiling. He noted as he ascended the stairs. More discolored patches of variable-sized squares and rectangles splotched the wall. Near the top of the landing, the railing coarse and biting grain transitioned to a supple smoothness. As if age had ignored this part of the railing, he raised his hand to take a look. The wood was a warm amber, as if freshly oiled. The rest of the railing continued and wrapped around the opening of the stairwell, ending at the threshold of an upstairs door. Brian's inspection of the upstairs revealed further incongruencies. It was in pristine condition, compared to the lower floor and the outside of the house for that matter. The walls were painted a pleasing color. The study was furnished with what could be argued modern but tasteful decor. Flooring throughout the upper level was a beautiful natural hardwood, finished with the same stain as the railing. Brian deduced the differences between the lower and upper floor were the doings of a lonely and bored old man. Or perhaps the realtor, Terry, had hired someone to spruce up the place and forgot to mention it. Brian sat on the king-size bed within one of the upper rooms and pondered while impulsively rubbing his lower jaw again. Interesting. Someone must have started renovating, I guess. Brian spoke aloud to no one. His thoughts returned inward. I suppose Grandpa Lawson must have grown restless late in life. Not like I knew the guy. Not sure of his inclinations. I assume the older generations know how to maintain a house. Hell, for all I know, he could have built the place. He then reached for a pack of smokes, hoping a rush of nicotine would aid him in making a decision in regards to the fate of the house and property. Smoke lingered in the small room. In its haze, he went back and forth with himself. The house appears to be solid enough, minus the broken window. Maybe moving to the land of cactus, quietude, and arid air wouldn't be so bad. The house just needs some attention downstairs and outside, but nothing outrageous from what I can tell. Though its location isn't the most happening area, of course. Very much in the boonies. Another deep drag. The cigarette ash extended almost to the butt. Another plume of smoke deepened the opacity of the haze. What does that matter, though? I'd be just as alone here as in my cramped and overpriced apartment, amidst all the hustle and bustle of that accursed city. Though, if this realtor is serious about the value of the land on which it sits, then that'd be quite the payday. Decisions indeed. Brian interrupted his reverie by checking on his phone. The screen was black and did not respond to his poking and button pushing. That's odd. I changed the damn thing on the way here. Maybe the fat check is the way to go. I could afford a nicer car, a nicer place for a while, and of course a phone that holds a damn charge. A scuffle down in the kitchen rendered him briefly inert. He was as still as the smoke which enveloped him. As he listened, recognition replaced the initial startling. It was the sound of hard leather soles shuffling on the kitchen floor. Brian made his way down from the upstairs bedroom, talking loudly to who he was sure must be Terry. "Hey, Terry, you scared me a bit. I almost forgot someone else was meeting me here. The house looks pretty solid, I'd say. Strongly thinking of." He rounded the corner into the kitchen. No realtor, no animal, no one. Just the subtle breeze and the engorged tongue of a door slightly ajar. Running his fingers through thinning hair, Brian stood confused but sure of what he had heard. Suspiciously, he spoke, attempting to rationalize. There must have been a stiff breeze. He poked his head out of the house's entrance and took a long look on the road. Still no sign of any approaching vehicle. Brian closed the door and turned back to face the large kitchen. Everything as it was when he entered, though he must have misremembered the state of the chair. It was not lying on its side, but tucked snugly against the small table. His confusion mounted and he yelled in protest. "I could have sworn it was." The sight of some aged stationery on the table stopped him mid-sentence. Another aspect of the kitchen he must have just missed when initially walking in. The paper had an elaborate filigree border which encompassed beautifully written cursive. On initial glance, he recognized his full name at the beginning of the letter. His name was further distinguished by being written in a reddish ink, in contrast to the main body of text, which was a faded black. Closer inspection also suggested the ink which penned his full name was fresh. At least fresher than the surrounding text. Scooping up the paper, he discerned its thickness and pulpy texture, suggesting that this was, indeed, an old form of paper stock. Captivated by the sudden and strange appearance of something so out of time, Brian, perturbed as he was, began to read. Dear Brian Harold Lawson, first off, apologies for not leaving more behind for you. When your grandmother passed, I sold most of the furniture and anything else I didn't absolutely need. I knew in my heart that I wouldn't be around much longer. I also must apologize on behalf of Greta and myself for not making efforts to meet you, our only grandson, before we expired. We hope that this house and the land on which it sits is adequate remuneration for our absence in your life. Terry, our agent, whom we deeply trust, has assured us that he will do everything in his power to see that you obtain this property. What you do with it, of course, is up to you. Though, for what it is worth, and I write this knowing full well you owe us nothing, we hope you keep the place and breathe new life into it. The place has good bones, requiring only the smallest of sacrifices from time to time to maintain its health. Pardon the morbid diction, it's what comes to mind first and most aptly describes what I'm trying to convey. Brian peeled his eyes from the letter and scanned his surroundings once more, listening hopefully for the rumbling of a car engine. An attempt at clearing his head of the strange and unnerving feeling which was beginning to infect him. There was nothing new to take in, and nothing but the sparse sounds of the desert and sporadic creaks of the aging house to hear. He decided to read on. Before you read any further, I implore you to read this letter in its totality before making any decision. Alternatively, as blunt and strange as this may sound, put the letter back down and immediately leave. What the hell is this? Brian reached down for his phone, then quickly remembered it was dead. He eyed the length of the remaining text. Not much was left. Though dueling sensations arose within him, the sense of something being off swelled to the point of extreme discomfort, and his gut screamed, "Time to leave," though his curiosity shouted back, "Read on, you coward." Begrudgingly, he resumed, "Thank you for continuing. Undoubtedly, the brief time you spent here has imbued you with peculiar feelings of which are warranted. I too have seen things one way, then, seemingly without reason, they appear another way upon second glance." Brian peered at the chair before him and then returned to the letter. "I always assumed there was something magical about this desert, with its abundant pinyon trees, various cacti, and entrancing sunrises and sunsets, which suffuse that endless mountainscape in a glorious array of color. Or maybe there is something off about the house itself. I usually arrive at that conclusion that I'm just not totally right in the head. I've lived a long life and there are certain truths, though sparse, that I've grown to accept. In regards to this place, there are some truths I was forced to accept. You've read this far and I won't keep you much longer. Unfortunately for yourself, you are about to be forced to accept an unusual and hellish truth." Brian's fight-or-flight instinct kicked into overdrive and he ripped his eyes from the letter. He attempted to turn around and exit the house, leaving behind whatever horrid truth the letter was hinting at. All at once he began to swivel his hips, shoulders, and head toward the door. His feet stood steadfast in stubborn resistance. Perplexed, he looked down to see what had anchored his feet. Except there were no feet to look at, or to be hindered. Brian saw simple chair legs where his knees and feet should be. Clutching the letter and frantically looking around in utter shock, he attempted to still himself, closing his eyes which, unbeknownst to him, were already secreting the saltiest of tears. His eyes burned, but he dared not open them. "It's not real. This is all some joke, some weird fucked up prank. When I open my eyes, I'll see my shoes and my pants, covering my very real feet and legs. Then I'll leave this letter, this old house, and this shithole county to its dry fate." Brian whipped himself into a courageous fervor. A draught of confidence and strong will filled him. He allowed himself to slowly open his eyes. His head was already tilted downward toward his feet. As he slowly retracted his eyelids, the briny tears clouded his vision. After a brief moment, the moisture evaporated, revealing an awful truth. His whole lower half had now transformed into the seat of a simple wooden chair. Reflexively, Brian tried to inhale enough breath to let loose a horrendous scream, but the sensation of expanding lungs and a protruding chest was not present. Instead, the coarse and rigid tendrils of long wood grain set in. An unyielding, fibrous framework had erected itself in the absence of a rib cage and a respiratory system. No air was inhaled, and no screams bounced from the walls of the house. The letter which he had desperately clutched drifted side to side, gracefully to the ground. Brian's consciousness remained intact and did not succumb to the same ligneous fate as his flesh and bone. though the way in which he perceived and experienced the world around him was forever changed. His sight was akin to having one's eyelids permanently sewn shut, sensing only suggestions of light. The blistering desert atmosphere offered no warmth, only perpetual desiccation of what used to be his flesh. The intermittent whisper of wind filtering through the broken kitchen window was not heard, but sensed in vibrations which flowed over and throughout the deepening ruts of his grain. The growl of a sports car engine assaulted the natural inhabitants unfortunate enough to have rooted into the soil bordering the road. Terry Jones consulted his Rolex for the time. Should be good by now. He stomped the gas pedal, tearing down the road with the confidence that accompanies familiarity. The house swiftly came into view. He parked his Porsche just off the road and in front of the house. Not a bad little Honda, should sell fast. Terry made a mental note as he walked past Brian's car on the way to the door of the house. A lively blush rendered the once faded red door a vibrant crimson. "It is done," Terry proclaimed with a solemn reverence as he bowed his head. Before entering, Terry straightened his silk tie and flattened the small creases from his expensive suit. Carefully opening the door, he took in the large kitchen and its new occupant. Slowly he walked in, stopping at the new chair and grasping the top of it before looking into the window above the sink. "Curious. I thought the broken window pane would have been top priority." He examined the chair with a critical eye. "Not a bad chair, though. Not bad at all." Terry released his sweaty grasp and began to run his fingertips along the chair, gauging how much effort it would take to refurbish. With a chilling lack of empathy, Terry addressed the human consciousness which now resided within the chair's fibers. "Brian, I offer you my sincere apologies for all the false pretenses. It's nothing personal. You were a bachelor with no real family ties, friends or romantic relationships, not even a pet to care for. A lonely man running away in some cramped apartment within a city that's become the epitome of monotony, going about your unfruitful and nigh parasitic existence. At least now you'll serve some purpose and contribute to the world in some way. Worry not, before too long I'll sand and oil you down." The last sentence was punctuated with seething disdain. Brian could not scream, nor could he cry. He lapped up the faint amount of moisture from Terry's clammy palm like a sick and dehydrated dog. Terry approached the window above the sink and shook his head. As he made his way to leave, he spoke aloud once more. "Until next time, enjoy the view, Brian." The satiated tongue locked with the loudest of thuds. The roar of a sports car engine faded into the wind. Brightness soon gave way to the deep dark of night. The world around him continued on, indifferent to his stiff existence, his rigid purgatory. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's stories. I want to thank mortanx, who wrote the first story, GothMomi, who wrote the second, and Isac Fresquez, who wrote the third, and Phil Zio from One Wall Studio, who made the new outro music. I also want to thank Whispering Scream, Ben Imparts, and Troy the Toymaker, who voiced the soldiers and scientist in Story 1, as well as Melissa from the Haunted Tales Anthology podcast, and Morgan Goodman, who voiced the side characters in Story 2. I also want to thank our patrons, and those in the Umbral Overlord tier, Shadowthread Stories. We are very close to reaching our 500 subscriber goal, so if you have any questions you would like me to answer while in my keeper suit, you can leave them in this video or in the original post I made for that. Also, you may have noticed that the name of the channel has been altered slightly. So with that, what happened was we found that when you type The Keeper into YouTube, you had to scroll for who knows how long to find anything on the channel, and that was a massive, massive issue. So I was talking to my team and a few people in the focus group, and ultimately we decided we gotta choose a different name, and we wanted to give the keeper his own actual name. And there was a few names that we were debating between. For example, Vardok was a contender for a while, but eventually we decided that Dubok had the best role to it, and maintained that dark and mysterious presence that's iconic to the keeper. So all in all, that's the only change, is the keeper has a name now. Everything else that's been planned, such as his origin story and the new project that I'm going to be doing with Angelo Di Bartolo from the Roswell Continuum, that's all still going to happen. It's been taking a little longer to get done because I had to double check all the notes and make sure that the keeper having a name isn't going to waylay any of the plans with all those stories, but we're getting really close and I'm pretty excited for that. But as for the whole branding of the channel, it's gonna change slightly. There's gonna be more emphasis on Dubok because that's just easier to find our channel with, but the whole role aspect of being a keeper is still definitely there. But anyway, appreciate you guys for watching, and there are going to be many more big videos on the way.